Game over, man. Game over.
You're gonna need a bigger boat. So serious.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome to episode 639 for June 2nd, 2025, and I'm JD Duran.
And I'm Brendan Cassidy.
Hey, thanks for joining us this week, everybody. It is a crazy time of year. We have hit the summer months. That means we are halfway through the year. And in just a couple of weeks at the end of the month, we'll get to our best movies of 2025 so far. Crazy to think that we are almost halfway through the year already.
Yeah, been a weird year for movies. If I could say
been.
so myself. Yeah,
For sure.
There's been some great ones. We'll talk about it when we get to that episode, but I wouldn't call it that bad of a year thus far.
No, there's been some great movies, for sure, as there always is. We tend to forget oftentimes because the second half of the year is full of crazy nonsense.
Yeah.
And there's admittedly a lot of great films that often come in the back half of a given year.
We're not done yet. But there are a lot that are worth talking about that might still be worth
sure.
talking about by the time we get to the year's end.
Mm-hmm.
There's also some that'll be worth talking about on the opposite end of that spectrum that we got a chance to see that are among the worst of the year. That'll probably remain the worst of the year.
For sure.
I don't know. I mean, one of them I called the worst film of the InSession film era. So that means this year has something going for it.
There's certainly that. And we'll get to that at the end of the month, as I noted. But I wanted to use that as an appetizer as to say, not only are we halfway through the year, we are, of course, halfway through this decade as well.
That's true.
And in just a few weeks, we are going to be talking about our top 5 movies of the decade so far, spanning 2020 through 2024 specifically.
Mm-hmm.
Those first 5 years, we will have an incredible guest, a special guest that I'm going to tease. I'm going to leave it as that for now. But we do have an awesome, awesome guest that I'm very, very excited to have back on the show. So leading up to that episode, because again, that is coming in 2 weeks' time. So leading up to that episode, we are going to have another course, if you will.
Yeah.
And we're going to be talking about best of the decade so far in various formats leading up to that episode. On this particular show, we are going to be talking about our top 5 performances of the 2020s so far.
Yeah.
No shortage of options.
That's anything. That includes male lead, female lead, supporting male, supporting female, any of those options.
Animal, best animal actor could include.
I didn't
the
go
whole
that
gamut.
far, but you're not wrong.
No.
Best performance by an inanimate object. That could also be part of it.
Exactly.
Get a little Annette action in this one.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thinking about the alien hat in Nope as maybe in my top 5 here.
I mean, that's the best. That's obviously the best, right?
Clearly. No, we're going to be talking about performances, and yes, to Brennan's point, that includes supporting and lead performances. Very much looking forward to that. We'll have a different topic next week. We haven't really landed what that's going to be, but we'll have something similar on next week's show as well. Mm-hmm. So I very much look forward to getting into that. Before we do, though, there are a few trailers that we want to talk about. And we'll get to that here in a second. I do want to lead off the show this week simply by reiterating the box office a little bit. Primarily, I want to emphasize a report that came out earlier today as we are recording this, again, June 2nd, that Thunderbolts is on its way to losing $100 million despite grossing essentially $370 million worldwide. And admittedly, that is low by Marvel standards if you look at the entirety of their run for sure.
We kind of had a sense that this was going to happen, just given how those numbers were looking at the onset. It seemed as though Thunderbolts was not going to be the hit that they needed.
No, and I think there's several factors, and we've talked about this before, so we don't have to relitigate it too much, but I think it's worth remembering that Thunderbolts is the Thunderbolts, despite what the faux title that we get at the end of the film might imply. Right. And going forward, maybe these characters will have a more prestigious shine to them. I don't know. But coming into this film, we're talking about characters that have either been antagonists, anti-heroes, or side characters in other projects. They're the Thunderbolts. They're not Captain America. It's not Spider-Man. It's not Iron Man or the Hulk. So there isn't going to be that large appeal. You couple that with a whole phase, almost 2 phases worth of Marvel losing trust in the general audience.
I think that's the big thing right there.
And that is certainly the biggest factor. There's no doubt about it. But I think when you couple those things together, it's not a huge surprise that Thunderbolts lands where it does.
Yeah, it was always a bit of a hard sell. Let's just put it that way.
Exactly. Despite the good reviews. And we, of course, love the film. I would argue it's Marvel's best in a really long time. It's going to take some time to earn that audience trust back. And the reason I wanted to bring this up is because a few weeks ago, and of course we brought this up, Bob Iger said, look, guys, we are transitioning, we are pivoting away from content and quantity. We're going to focus on quality. We want to make good movies again.
You know, yeah.
And we were like, that's awesome. I love to hear that. But even then, and you can check the archives, Brendan and I were a little dubious on those comments.
There were many people, you included, that were making the Thanos snap analogy with Bob Iger's new word choice, essentially, this new direction of focusing on quality over quantity. I think, if anything, because that was potentially good news, that was more of a Hulk snap. And now, if he goes back on those words, this is the Thanos snap that we were all alluding to.
Yeah, and that's ultimately the point that I'm trying to make here. I do wonder if he is going to completely contradict himself when he sees these numbers and how much they lost. It's Disney, after all. I just cannot fathom. I need to see it to believe it, that they are going to stick to the Thunderbolts formula, even though when you put it in context, as we just did, minor characters coming together and losing trust. Despite that context, they're going to panic. Iger is going to panic, and he's going to retract that statement. Never mind. We got to go back. We got to go back to a different formula.
I have a few added thoughts to that, and maybe this could also serve as like some type of blessing in disguise of a sort. So we're obviously going to talk about the box office a little bit, but I do think this sort of plays into this, just given some of the recent films that have been doing fairly well. Will the success of Lilo and Stitch help mitigate this as a sunk cost?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Look,
I say that as a double-edged sword, because if Lilo and Stitch is as successful as it is, we're already talking about $1 billion plus movie on the way. Of course, that means more movies like Lilo and Stitch happening, which is a bad thing.
Exactly.
But could this be a short-term thing where Disney realizes, okay, this movie is good enough that we can cover our losses as a company because of this hit? So then they don't worry about the failure that is Thunderbolts from a financial level.
Yeah. And that might be the world we have to live in.
Yeah.
We have to put up with the Lilo and Stitches of the world to get the Thunderbolts that we love and cherish. Like that just might have to be the trade-off.
I'll say this. As much as I don't like this trend of Disney live-action remakes, if that's the financial benefit we need to make Marvel get into a better spot, I'll take it. I'll take
Yeah.
it. Okay. Because
Yeah.
those movies have their own audience. They're going to be what they are. They're never going to be for us. Right. But
Yeah.
we've been on the Marvel train before. We used to love these movies and we want to see them get back on track. So if there's ever a
Yep.
property that Disney owns that we want to see bounce back, it's Marvel. And if coinciding with a bunch of live action Disney remakes that we don't care for, but can still financially stimulate them, I'll take that. I will
Yeah.
certainly take that.
I agree. I completely agree. And I would also selfishly add in Star Wars, which also in the last week, it was reported that the budget for Andor was $650 million.
That's amazing.
Incredible. That is quite the budget for a show that simply went to streaming. And also there were comments that Bob Iger said that streaming is dead, despite giving Tony Gilroy $650 million for a show that would go on to their streaming platform. Absolutely crazy.
And on top of that, Tony Gilroy giving absolute crap to the Little Mermaid. Well, did you hear about those interviews?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, but again, and maybe that speaks to exactly what we're talking about. We have to do the Little Mermaids of the world for you to get your Andor project, okay? Like that is the trade-off. And if we have to live with the Little Mermaids and the Lilo and Stitches, which I don't think are great despite their hearts being in the right place. If we get great Marvel movies and we get great Star Wars, I think, again, I know that I'm speaking selfish here, but I can certainly live with that. Absolutely.
Because those are the Disney properties we want to see get great, right?
Yeah.
I could take or leave what these live action remakes are. I don't really care about them. Even if a good one comes along, sure, whatever. They just don't excite me. But if a good Marvel movie comes along, a good Marvel show, a good Star Wars property comes along that is legitimately great, I find that more exciting and more eventful. And I want to see it get back to that.
I agree. So hopefully we do get quality on the Star Wars and Marvel front, more Andors and Thunderbolts, if you will.
Yeah.
Hopefully that is the case. I am certainly willing to live with that trade-off. And speaking of Lilo and Stitch, and I know we've talked about this before, Brendan, honestly, though, I can't recall if we had this conversation offline or here on the show.
Okay.
But I do want to speak to TikTok here for a moment. I'm not on TikTok all that much. People talk about Twitter and how toxic that place may be. Yeah. And look, it's not always great. I think TikTok is borderline twice as bad as Twitter is.
TikTok is hell. TikTok's a hellhole.
TikTok is the worst. In my opinion, it is the absolute worst.
Yeah.
And I put out a TikTok from our Lilo and Stitch podcast review that we did last week. And clearly people just weren't willing to listen to the show or consider the context of which that clip and what we were talking about. And in the clip, I was talking about how the film doesn't abandon its themes of Moana. It packages it in a very different way, and it's there. I wasn't even saying whether it's good or bad. I was simply arguing that it is there in the film.
It's there in some way. Yeah.
Lost their goddamn minds. Like there was no discourse to be had. It was just straight up arrows pointed at our heads. And the comments were so vulgar and completely missing the point. Like they just wanted to argue. They just wanted to attack, that I ended up taking the TikTok down. It wasn't worth my time. I got better things to do.
Yeah. I was going to say,
take all the engagement.
You should have taken screenshots so I can see it, because I'm not on TikTok. I don't know the context here.
And I don't blame you. The comments were bad. They were really bad. And they weren't considering what we were actually saying. And the people that I'm talking to here are probably not listening to this, and that's perfectly fine. This is more of a therapy session than anything else.
For sure.
But it was so absurd because if you listen to that episode, despite my lovely son being there with us, and thanks to everybody,
they better not have yelled at him.
No, not at all. And thanks to everyone that reached out about Sam being on the show. There was a lot of great comments and feedback about Sam and him being on, and I really do appreciate that.
Absolutely.
But despite Sam being here, you and I still were able to have an honest conversation. We criticized the film heavily. Clearly, we were not defending Disney and a lot of the decisions they made in that film. I found it charming enough. I think there are endearing qualities. I did not mind the repackaging of the familial themes. But if others do have a problem with it, and specifically there were Hawaiians coming out and criticizing the film for the way it repackages those themes, and they have their own valid reasons for why they feel that way. And that's fine. That's great. We were not trying to degrade that at all. And if you listen to the show in its entirety, you would understand that. You would come to that conclusion. It's very easy to see that we were not the biggest
fans, man.
Yeah. And so, like, anyway, TikTok, I know that platform is made for short clips to be spread in a way that can sometimes be disingenuous or have missing context.
It is, yeah.
But my God, please consider context. There's more than just what you hear in a 60-second clip.
Oh, nuance is a dangerous word, isn't it?
I know.
I don't think people understand what that means anymore.
At any rate, Lilo and Stitch, please go check out our review from last week. It was great. My son was on the show, and we had a ball. It was a great time.
And he might be back.
And he might be back sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
But yeah, Lilo and Stitch dominates the box office once again, pulling in another $62 million, a 57% drop off. That film is doing very well.
Yeah.
So far, $613 million worldwide, and will likely fund the new Avengers, wherever that goes. Thank you, Lilo and Stitch.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Stitch, for giving that opportunity.
Yeah. I also want to note as well, before we move on to trailers, in its seventh weekend.
Oh, I knew.
Seventh weekend.
Yeah. You're going to the Sinners talk. Heck yeah.
Sinners is still in the top 6. It still hauls in $5.2 million, which is less than $2 million difference from Bring Her Back, which had its initial weekend. Now, granted, Bring Her Back didn't have the widest of releases.
Or the budget of Sinners.
Or the budget, for sure. It's a little A24 horror film, so I'm not trying to compare the two. But it was the opening weekend for Bring Her Back, whereas Sinners, again, is almost 2 months into its release.
Yeah, wasn't it only like a 30-some percent
38,
drop?
Yeah, 38% drop. Yeah.
I saw someone tweet this, and I do share these sentiments. This is getting a Best Picture nomination, isn't it?
It has to. At this point
now. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Academy loves honoring early successes like this that have such a surprise element to them.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
this is basically Top Gun Maverick for this year in some ways.
Yeah. I mean, $350 million worldwide for that movie is pretty insane.
I agree.
It's pretty great. So
I agree.
I saw that still doing really well despite it being 2 months down the line.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's incredible.
Absolutely incredible. All right, a few trailers we want to talk about here before we get to the top 5 this week. Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein had its trailer dropped over the weekend, and the only thing that I will say, or I guess what I'll start this conversation by saying, it is an utter crime that I'm going to have to watch that on Netflix. Nothing against Netflix, but I don't want to see that on a streaming platform. I desperately want to see that in a theater.
That is my, I don't want to call it a reservation, but that's my fear with this movie. Because we've seen this happen before when movies are going maybe not necessarily straight to Netflix, but they are Netflix productions or films that Netflix is distributing, right?
Yeah.
Let's say a movie like, I don't know, The Irishman, the Martin Scorsese film. You saw that in a theater, it was an absolute cinematic experience.
Yeah.
You watch that on Netflix, I don't know, something about the transfer to Netflix just gives it a certain pixelated sheen that makes it look like content in a way. And
Mm.
I did see that a little bit in this trailer for Frankenstein. It does look like something, given the platform that I watched it on, like it was perhaps sanitized for Netflix distribution in a way. When what we're actually seeing on screen looks very artful, it looks very inventive. It's very much in the vein of what we've come to love from Guillermo del Toro.
Mhm.
We need to see this on the big screen. We need to
Yeah.
envelop ourselves in the vastness of this thing.
Uh-huh.
And I hope that Netflix doesn't relegate it to something that distorts it in a way that it shouldn't. And that's the only thing that worries me about it.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I don't want to perhaps be presumptuous here because it's Guillermo del Toro. He always does great work. And I'm hoping that this is one of those films that is its own artful project that just happens to be on Netflix versus it being a Netflix film. And it very much seems to be that case. I share a little bit of that reservation, but I will say I was overall blown away by the trailer. It looks really great. The colors certainly pop. It is vibrant, but most importantly, it is exactly what I was hoping it would be. And we talked about this a few weeks ago. I can't remember the context or what the topic was, but I brought this film up to say, I just really want Del Toro to take a story that we're all very familiar with. We've seen Frankenstein a gazillion different ways by this point, but make it his own. And that's what I saw in this trailer. It felt
looks unique.
Very
it looks
Guillermo
unique.
del Toro to me.
Yeah. It definitely seems to be kind of tailoring itself off of what Robert Eggers did with Nosferatu in a way. Obviously Nosferatu came out only not even a year ago. So it's hard to say that that movie was inspired by that, but I think it's going to make for a pretty apt comparison when Frankenstein comes out, as far as filmmakers taking very familiar tropey horror stories and recontextualizing it for their own respective modern lenses. And I could totally see Frankenstein falling into a similar camp as well.
Yeah. I mean, when I watch this, and it's Del Toro, so this is going to sound obvious, but when I was watching it, I just had that same sensation as when I watched something like Pan's Labyrinth or Kronos or The Shape of Water, and why I love those films. The Devil's Backbone. There's something about that Del Toro sensibility and how he crafts not just monsters, but the world around his monsters that I deeply, deeply love and resonate with. And despite seeing Frankenstein a bazillion different times, this does feel like a fresh iteration, which it was my hope. And again, I can only judge it based off the trailer, but it certainly looks like he's going to deliver on that promise.
I will say, to get a bit more detailed, as far as how this feels like a Guillermo del Toro film, the two films from his filmography that I was getting the most of a comparison with was something like Crimson Peak and Nightmare Alley, which personally, and I think those are very underrated Guillermo del Toro films, especially Nightmare Alley. I think I like that movie more than pretty much anybody. That's a movie I really did respond
Certainly
to. But
more than me.
I actually think that might be top 5 for him, if I'm being honest. But I like I kind of like the meanness of those movies, which is something that Del Toro doesn't always explore. And not to say that he needs to explore that more, but it's a kind of a nice change of pace when he's most known for kind of trying to find the beauty within the grotesqueness, right? And I think he does that very well. But with Frankenstein, maybe he's going to tap into something a bit edgier, a bit meaner in a way, and I did get a little bit of that, especially given Oscar Isaac's centralized performance there. I thought was pretty effective, and I like that touch. I think that's going to make for an interesting comparison in that regard, which is why I'm looking forward to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I can certainly see the Crimson Peak comparison for sure. I don't see Nightmare Alley as much, and for me, thank God, because I'm not the biggest fan of that movie. I don't like it nearly as much as you.
Yeah, I know. I'm on an island on that one. I'm in an alley alone on that one.
And I do kind of wonder where he's going to take this, because Frankenstein at its core does have an interesting pathos to it. There's certainly an edge to it.
Sure.
And to me, I think that's the brilliance of Del Toro, or at least what I like about it, is he's able to bring an empathy to that darkness that otherwise wouldn't really exist.
Yeah.
And he's able to, of course, make that cinematic simultaneously. That's my feeling with this. I am curious how he's going to go about telling this particular narrative, and how involved Oscar Isaac's Dr. Frankenstein is going to be. And in an interview, Oscar Isaac was essentially saying it's not at all a horror film. It's simply a dark emotional drama.
Which kind of sounds like Del Toro. I mean, has he really ever made a horror film in the most literal sense of the word? I mean, Crimson Peak marketed itself as a horror film, but that really was a gothic romance.
Yeah. I mean, because I agree with you. The Devil's Backbone might get the closest aesthetically, but even that film, Pan's Labyrinth, Chronos certainly might come the closest as well.
I guess Mimic is really his most literal horror film, and I know most people would say that's his worst because it's barely a Del Toro film by comparison.
Yeah,
so that's an odd outlier for sure, though.
Yeah, but my point in that is to say even Chronos and Labyrinth and Devil's Backbone, again, aesthetically there might be superficial horror elements, but again, underneath. He's tapping into a pathos, inside the darkness of those movies that makes Del Toro who he is as a storyteller. And it's why I love him and what he does, so.
Yeah. It's what makes The Shape of Water such a fascinating movie, because that's probably his most traditional and old fashioned movie, despite, one of the main characters being a fish man. But the whole point of that movie is to make you forget that man is a fish man.
Exactly.
Otherwise, it just feels like a 1950s romance in a way.
Yeah,
which is something I kind of like about it.
Which is why I will always respect it as a Best Picture winner and include it with the Moonlights and the great winners that we've seen over the last decade, because there is despite that traditional quality, it is a magic trick that he's able to make this borderline conventional romance, but by the way, one of the characters is a fish man. And he makes that not weird. I mean, it's weird in a sense, especially when you describe it that way, but when you watch the film, all of that comes together.
It makes you forget about it.
It does, yeah. That's great. Anyway, long
Del Toro's good at his
rabbit
job.
hole to say. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to Frankenstein, no doubt about it. We should probably talk about Superman. I don't know if you and I are carrying the torches for Superman, but any thoughts on that most recent trailer?
I'm not carrying any torches, but I'm also not carrying any pitchforks like some other people are. I'm just kind of sitting in the middle on this one. I think it looks fine, honestly. I know a lot of talk out there is around the film's look, just the overall cinematic language of it, the visual language of it, the overall visual effects, and just the way the camera moves. It is a little weird. It looks a little wonky, if I'm being honest. I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing yet. Really, my reservation around the movie is that it looks like TV to me. It looks like TV. That's the thing that has me a bit at a distance with it. I like the casting. I think it looks like an interesting story and an interesting angle on Superman. I'm not opposed to any of that stuff. I am not partaking in the whole the whole Zack Snyder war that's kind of fueling it, whether people are for it or against it. I don't care about that narrative at all. I just care about this movie in a vacuum. And in a vacuum, I think it looks fine. And every trailer we get, I still sit at that same level of fine. And this one's no exception.
Yeah, I don't really have too much to add because we did briefly talk about this when that initial teaser came out. And now that we've gotten a full-length trailer, I think it's only heightened the previous thoughts that I had, in the sense that it does seem as if it's getting Superman right. I like the Superman isms that I see here. I love the dynamic between Clark and Lois. All of that is great. Even what we are seeing here in terms of Lex Luthor, I think could be really compelling. So from a character aspect, I think there's a lot to be excited about.
The lore and the mythology looks right.
Yes. But I agree with you. Visually, a little bit to be desired.
It's like James Gunn is clearly getting the lore right, but I don't think he's getting the movie making right yet.
Yeah.
That's the difference for me.
And it just makes you wonder if there's some sort of mandate from Warner Brothers at the top to be like, look, we got to make this look a certain way for when this inevitably goes to, whatever we're calling it today, Max, HBO Max.
HBO Go. Eventually, it'll be HBO Go.
Have we fully gone back to HBO? Like, wherever the next evolution of that is.
The more they keep trying to drop that branding, the more it keeps coming back in a harder way.
It's so dumb, but so funny. Like
it's amazing.
We are slowly devolving back to HBO because
why would you want to lose that branding? Everyone associates great content with HBO. We always have. People still think of Band of Brothers and The Sopranos and HBO all under the same umbrella.
Yeah. No one cares about Max. Who's Max? We don't even know who Max is. But I know HBO.
That whole time, yeah.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. But that's how it feels. That might be cynical, maybe obtuse of me to say. I don't really know. But would it surprise me if James Gunn was dictated to make the film look that way, so that way it can just live forever on Max/HBO, whatever it's called? I mean, maybe. That's kind of how it feels. To your point about how it having this TV feel, like it has a little bit of that Netflix energy to it. We have to have it look a certain way because of the streaming angle.
And that's unfortunate. I will say, if there is one thing about this trailer that I am excited about, is that it does look like James Gunn is not going to be tapping into the James Gunn isms that you and I don't really respond to as much as others, specifically in movies like The Suicide Squad or maybe Super, for instance, where he's really desperate to sidestep expectations in a very jokey way. It does look like he's tapping more into a heartfelt, sincere energy that I actually think he's better at. I agree. I think that's what makes a movie like Guardians Volume 3 so effective. Yeah. Is when he's able to tap into that type of sincerity. And I feel like he's at least going for that here. So again, this is basically once again our way of saying the material itself doesn't look like it's the problem here with Superman. The lore looks right. The story looks right. It's more so James Gunn, the director, I think is where the problem is going to be.
And I agree. I did not get those James Gunn isms that I do not like at all. I did not get that. I did not get that vibe here with this trailer. Thank God. Yeah. I agree with you. I find that incredibly grating. Does not work for me. And I like when he does that stuff in the Guardians movies, it makes sense in the context of how he builds those characters. And it's not nearly as in your face. I think it works for the world building of the Guardians movies.
I agree.
Whereas in Super and in the Suicide Squad especially, it's done in such an over-the-top obvious way that when it comes, it's not surprising, for one, even though the film thinks that it's doing this gotcha moment, and it just completely underwhelms the momentum that the film had built.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem to be the case here, although I do kind of wonder with the Green Lantern and Hawkgirl and that element where all these other characters are coming into play? Could it be something similar to the beginning of the Suicide Squad, where this film cold opens with this huge battle and all those characters, and then he does something like that?
I don't think it's going to do that. That just doesn't feel in keeping with the Superman ethos and the world that he lives in. Like,
No, I agree. Look, I
Yeah.
agree with you, but
Yeah.
would he do that? Maybe. I mean,
maybe. I don't think he will. I think he spent the Suicide Squad playing those cards very clearly, so perhaps he can just get them off his chest.
Yeah. I hope
and-
you're right.
Yeah,
Very
and
much
hopefully
hope
that's
you're
the
right.
case. Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully that is the case. Generally still looking forward to it, but I'm not I'm not carrying the torch for that one.
There
by
are
any stretch of
definitely
the
other
imagination.
movies this summer that I'm more looking forward to than Superman.
Which speaking of, you noted to me earlier today, Happy Gilmore 2.
That looks fun. It looks fun. I enjoyed what I saw with this trailer. It looks like what you would expect for Happy Gilmore 2, and I admittedly have a bit of a soft spot for that first movie. It's
Oh,
I
yeah.
think a lot of us our age have a very obvious soft spot for that movie.
Yeah.
It's not good, but it's funny. It's absolutely funny.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'm at this weird point in my life where I really like what Adam Sandler's doing, and maybe I'm just I don't know, maybe I'm just nostalgic for that Adam Sandler shtick because he's tapping into completely different things as an actor. So when he goes back to it, it actually feels fresh and exciting all over again, which is weird to say. So it's interesting to see him go back to this when I'm at a point now where I kind of associate Adam Sandler with Uncut Gems and Hustle more so than, Adam Sandler movies, Happy Madison productions. So I think that makes it kind of, I don't know, it weirdly made the trailer more touching and sincere to me to see him go back to something, because it actually felt like he was going back to something as opposed to just doing the same thing all over again.
Yeah, I hope that you're right, because I was really underwhelmed by the trailer.
Okay.
I do love that first Happy Gilmore as well. Maybe it's because I grew up on it. I don't know, but I think it's hysterical. I love it. It was Adam Sandler at his best during that era.
Mm-hmm.
And Happy Gilmore 2 just looks really uninspired. To me, it just feels like all the great stuff from the first film, let's just do that again. Like beat for beat, let's just do the exact same thing again.
Could be setting that up for a different joke, but we'll see.
Which
we'll
could
see if
be.
you're right, and hopefully you're wrong. But we'll see.
We'll see. And look, that could just be the marketing going, look, let's pander to people that
Let's get the
No one
viewership
loved the
before
first
we
one.
give them an actual movie.
exactly. And that very much could be the case. I'm willing to concede that for sure. And I hope that is the case. Really hope that is the case, because the trailer did not pander to me very well. Did not work for me. But I'm also not someone that looks at a legacy sequel and goes, yeah, let's just do the same thing again. Let's just get the boys back and we'll redo the same thing all over again. Like, generally, I don't necessarily want that out of a legacy sequel, or any sequel for that matter.
Same.
Perhaps there are some exceptions along the line, but generally I don't want that. And this trailer was beat for beat the first film. That's all it showed me.
I agree with you. Yet I think part of why it worked for me is that it looked like it was very self-aware in how beat for beat that it was, as if it is going to call attention to itself and not necessarily deconstruct that. I think the movie's not going for that level of intelligence. But it does seem to be like it's deliberately setting you up for familiarity only to sidestep that later. Only because I feel like I've seen other movies market themselves in this way, especially comedies, only to deliver something else. And I feel like it's playing with these tropes in a way as if to say we're actually not doing these tropes, but we're giving them to you here. And hopefully that is the case. But to your point, if it isn't, then I will be a bit disappointed. I just hope it's more of an in joke than anything else.
And again, hope you're right. We shall see, but that is my reservation, and
I think
why
it's a fair reservation. Yeah.
Why I didn't respond to the trailer, but we'll see. Because what you're talking about in terms of Adam Sandler and this phase of his career, I do agree with. I do generally like a lot of the choices that he's making. And I love him as that character. I love him as Happy, despite me not being a Boston Bruins fan. But him in that Bruins jersey works in these movies, or at least it worked in that initial movie quite a lot. So,
Oh,
we'll
yeah.
see.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite Adam Sandler comedy? Is it Happy Gilmore, or is it something else that you've maybe gravitated towards?
Man, talk about something I haven't thought about.
So I did not mean to put you on the spot. It's just a question that came to mind that I thought might be fun to ask right now.
Like, probably, I mean, that's the one that I feel like I grew up with watching the most. I
Sure.
like Billy Madison fine as well. It feels like that one is talked about the most. Maybe I'm
Well, I think
being
that was
misguided
one of
there,
his
but-
earliest ones. I mean, he was in comedies leading up to Billy Madison, but I feel
Yeah,
like
yeah,
if I'm
yeah.
not mistaken, Billy Madison was kind of the first quote unquote Adam Sandler comedy. End quote.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe that's why there's simply a lot of people that champion that film, and I do like it, but I don't love it nearly as much as Happy Gilmore, and maybe even some of his others. The Wedding Singer, I also really like a lot.
I think for
The
me, it might be
Waterboy is
I think-
always
yeah,
again
I
that's
think-
a little
I think,
nostalgic.
Yeah, I think The Waterboy is my favorite.
Waterboy's fun. Yeah.
Yeah. But then again, like I kind of like when Adam Sandler plays kind of a nice guy in these really dumb comedies, and I think he
Yeah.
does that very well in The Waterboy. But then, of course, you also have Kathy Bates giving a performance that may have actually should have been recognized at the Academy Awards.
She's so good. Really, really good. Yeah, I like that one a lot as well. I mean, I guess if I had to rank them, it probably would be Happy and The Waterboy would be my number 2.
Okay, yeah, I think it's
those
a
are
solid
easily
top
my
two.
top 2. Yeah, for sure. And then, some of the other ones I could take them or leave them.
Yeah, I have a soft spot for 50 First Dates. As ridiculous
51st
as
Dates
that
I really like. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's no wonder why Adam Sandler worked with Drew Barrymore on a few movies, because as far as his romantic endeavors are concerned, they clearly had good chemistry, and they capitalized on that.
Yeah, that one's also really good as well. I again had a soft spot for The Longest Yard as well.
Oh, that's not bad. Yeah, that's
yeah.
not bad.
So I enjoyed that one. But yeah, I mean, which is to say, like, yeah.
Yeah, as long as you're not saying
of his
yeah.
comedies.
Yeah, as long as you're not saying Little Nicky.
No, hate that movie. Maybe hate's a strong word, but certainly do not like it at all.
Yeah, I don't like it either.
Okay, and then the last one that we're gonna mention here, real quick. Obviously it's a Netflix heavy show because of the
recent event. Yeah.
recent event they had. But Wake Me Up Dead, it wasn't a full length trailer, like a little teaser, 40-second teaser.
Is that what it's called? Wake Me Up Dead? I thought it was called Wake Up Dead Man.
Or whatever it's called. The new Knives Out. Whatever it is.
Sorry, I didn't mean to correct you. I was just have I been getting the title wrong the whole
Look,
time?
For full transparency, I am running on very little sleep. I am extremely exhausted. The fact that I am even here semi-conscious is kind of a miracle.
The fact that you at least remembered that the title has the word dead and wake in it somewhere. That's
where I'm at. I mean, to this point, and we're like 30, 35 minutes into this show, and I'm kind of impressed that I haven't stumbled more. Like I am.
No, we're gonna
dying
get
here.
We're gonna get to the exciting topic soon. That'll hopefully wake you up.
Yeah, that'll certainly get the juices flowing a little bit further for sure. At any rate, the new Ryan Johnson Knives Out movie, however you want to call it.
I mean,
Any thoughts?
It looks like an interesting spin on this franchise, which I think is exciting to see. It's a very brief teaser, so there's not much to go on at this point. Of course, it has a stacked cast. That's kind of the theme with these movies. I just think it's kind of interesting, and I don't know if this was intentional. Perhaps it's just a coincidence that these 3 murder mystery movies kind of mirror another set of 3 murder mystery movies that we've gotten as of late. That's the Kenneth Branagh films because I was thinking a lot about A Haunting in Venice while watching this trailer, just given the trajectory of that franchise and how it kind of went full on horror for its third entry. And this one kind of seems to be doing the same thing with Wake Up Dead Man. So not enough to go on yet, but I overall enjoy these movies. I'm one of the few that actually likes Glass Onion a little bit more than the original Knives Out, but I think they're both enjoyable for what they are. But I like that it looks like it's a different spin on this, so that should be fun and exciting.
Yeah, I am really looking forward to this as well. Not too much to take away from that 40-second teaser other than the tone looks like it's going to be quite different from Glass Onion, which I do really like. But again, it's only a little teaser that might be completely like misdirecting, which given what these films are, that certainly could be the case. That I would not be surprised if that is the case, but we shall see. I am very excited for it. And I do want to slightly defend myself on the title here because I'm looking at my text messages with one Mr. Brennan Cassidy.
Okay.
And we were going through which trailers that we were going to cover here. And I brought up Frankenstein, I brought up Superman, and what Brennan sends to me is we could talk about Wake Me Up Dead, is what he says.
Did I send that to you? So that was my fault. Okay, I will take the blame. I'll blame autocorrect on that.
Yeah, clearly autocorrect is the culprit here, but in my exhaustion, I just clearly copied and pasted that and didn't even think to correct him.
We know the movie is called Wake Up Dead Man. I'm looking it up right now just to confirm that as well. But okay, I misled you. I guess
so Brennan misled me, and I was too tired to know. So just a lot working against us in the moment. At any rate,
I did
was
mislead
really funny.
you. Dang, I set you up for failure.
Really funny. Yes, Wake Up Dead Man. The latest from Ryan Johnson. Looks
If
like
you
it's
do
going
fall
to be a
asleep on
lot
this
of fun.
episode, that's what I'm going to be saying to you mid-conversation. JD, wake up, dead man.
Seriously, wake up. God bless. Anyway, my final thought, I love these movies. Love Knives Out, love Glass Onion, despite whatever the new film is going to be. I don't even need to see a full trailer, to be perfectly honest with you. The cast is excellent once again, and they can keep making these movies forever as far as I'm concerned. So really excited. All right, Brennan, let's talk about traveling, particularly if you're going overseas. You know that international roaming, the fees on that can rack up so incredibly fast.
Oh, it's deadly. It's absolutely deadly.
You don't want it. You need to avoid it, which is why we love Saley, because it's a digital eSIM that you download on your phone. It's extremely easy to use. It's affordable. And they have data plans for virtually any country in the world. So no matter where you go, you can simply download the app, get your plan, and you have access to your phone as you would normally. And who wouldn't love that?
Who wouldn't love that? Because Saley absolutely understands how effectively costly and overwhelming eSIMs can be if you don't know how to remove your own phone SIM card. That's a frustrating thing. It absolutely is. And Saley understands that by making everything convenient and safe and fast for you as you travel. You don't need to wait in line at the airport for whatever local SIM card they're going to give you. This allows you to also avoid scammers who might be selling fake SIM cards outside of their regulations. You don't have to wander looking for public Wi-Fi spots. Everything is still at your fingertips. You're always connected, and it's always safe.
Exactly. And if you get the unlimited data plan, you'll never have to worry about running out of data. And if that wasn't good enough, Saley is built by Nord Security, so your privacy is very much protected, very much top of mind. You can browse confidently knowing that Saley will block malicious ads, help you stay safer in your adventures. They have hundreds of data plans in over 190 countries. It's available on iOS and Android. You never have to reinstall the app. You can keep the app on your phone all the time. Simply choose a plan when you're traveling. It's super, super easy. They have customer support 24/7. And if you have any issues, they can refund you, no problem at all. So click on the link in our description, whether that be on YouTube or through Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You'll see the link. Click on that link and you'll get 5% off when you use the code ISF5 at checkout. So get your plan and use the code ISF5 at checkout, and you'll get 5% off your next eSIM plan. It's super simple, very easy. You're going to love it. And we thank Saley for their support. All right, Brendan, let's talk about coffee.
Let's talk about what you're running on right now.
Look, I am on fumes, even with coffee, and I had a lot of coffee today, even recently, like in the last hour or so. And I'm still running on fumes. Like I'm barely surviving here.
I will say, you know, when you have so much coffee throughout the day, if you have more than you're supposed to, at some point coffee starts to taste a little bit like you're getting sick of it. But I've never had that reaction to Coffee Cult, I must say.
No, that's kind of the problem in some ways, because Coffee Cult is so good. Like the coffee is so delicious that oftentimes I just salivate for it and I just want it, even though I might not need it or I shouldn't have it. I just want to drink it because it tastes incredible. But that's a good problem to have. If you're a coffee drinker, you don't want to drink crap coffee. You don't need to go to the store and get the stuff that tastes like someone scraped it off the bottom of their shoe. You want to get good,
perfect comparison,
specialty grade coffee. This is high-end gourmet coffee, and it is incredible. If you get the Peru or the Harar, it has these lively, vibrant notes of strawberry and citrus fruit that is just exquisite. Or you can get the Sumatra or the Brazil that have these chocolate caramel notes to them. That's equally incredible.
So good.
No matter what you're craving, they have coffees available for you. They have different blends, different single origins. You got to go check out Coffee Cult.
Yeah, and we have to note as well that it's not just about the taste with Coffee Cult. We live in a day and age where the making of coffee, ethically speaking, is kind of a dime a dozen, right? And the beauty of Coffee Cult is that they go out of their way to make sure that their beans are farmed and come from farms that are paying their workers fairly, especially women, and it's all done organically. It really does a great job keeping that in mind, and that's very important for a lot of people nowadays.
Exactly. It's all ethically sourced, and they want to make sure that the farms are doing the right things. That is certainly a big part of their ethos for sure. So you got to go check them out. Go to coffeecult.com. That's coffee with a K, cult with a K, coffeecult.com. At checkout, use the code ISF25. Again, that code is ISF25. You'll get 15% off at checkout. I promise you're going to love this coffee. Go check them out, and we thank Coffee Cult for their support. All right, let's get to our top 5 this week. I'm very, very excited to dig into this. As we noted, in a few weeks, we are going to be doing our top 5 movies of the decade so far. And with this exercise, we are focusing on the first 5 years of the decade. So we're not including 2025. We'll get to that at the end of the decade. We're focusing on 2020 through 2024 specifically here. We'll get to movies in a few weeks. For this episode, we are doing performances, our top 5 performances of the decade so far. And as Brennan noted, that includes every category: supporting or lead.
Or animal, or object.
Or animal, or object, yes. Whatever performance moved you, that's what we're going to talk about here.
Spoiler alert, I have no animals or objects in my top 5.
Yeah, neither do I. All people. I
humans,
chose all people.
Only humans.
Exactly. I guess outside of eliminating animals and objects, did you have any other criteria here?
No, really no criteria. Basically, I just went back and looked at some of our previously published awards over the past few years from 2020 onward to see, okay, do things still hold for us? Has anything changed? Am I okay with these 5 in these respective categories, or have I missed anyone? And it was really just a compilation of all those things.
Yeah, that's ultimately where I'm at as well. And it's why I love publishing those lists every year with our InSession Film Awards. And for those that don't know, every year we have the InSession Film Awards, and we have all of our nominees, which we do individually. So when we do the InSession Film Awards, Brendan has his own set of nominees for each category. I have my own set of nominees. We discuss it, talk through our own winners, and we publish all of that at InSessionFilm.com. You can see our list of nominees and winners for each year. In fact, I'll go ahead and link those in the show notes for this episode, so you can go and check that out if you want to see our nominees and winners for each of the years we're going to talk about here. I did go back and look at that. The only other thing that was challenging here, I have my winners, and to your point, you have to look through, consider, do these still hold up? Would these still be my winners? That is one element of it. But there's also some years that have double nominees that, where you're picking one winner, but maybe another performance that's nominated would have won in another year. And so I'm looking at how that kind of affects how I chose this, because admittedly, there was a couple of categories where I fell victim to that. So it wasn't just a matter of taking my winners and then selecting 5 out of those. There were nominees that, well, they may not have won in their particular year, and I don't even know if I would change who won necessarily. But when I put those up against other years for those categories, it's like there's still strong contenders despite not winning in the year in which they came out.
That was actually a really fun part of this whole exercise, was going back to see which years were the most competitive and which ones delivered consistently the better performances that I was considering for this particular top 5. And I think what's interesting is, I don't know, my top 5 could shift mid-conversation. This really isn't set in stone. I have a top 10 that I'm pretty happy with, but as far as the 5 themselves, that could fluctuate. But as I speak right now, I've got 2 in my top 5 that not only were performances from the same year, but were in the same category, which goes to show.
Just about to say the same thing.
Yeah. I don't know if we have the exact same example. We probably don't, but I think it's interesting when you have an option like that, that 2 competing in the same category in a certain year are now both among the very, very best performances of the decade so far. I think that's really neat.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and that's what's so fascinating about that particular category, the one that at least I'm referring to. Obviously, you feel the same about yours. But yeah, there's one category that we're going to talk about in this conversation where, when you're doing this exercise, you can only pick one winner. There's only one winner out of your 5 nominees.
Now it's our chance to pick 2 or 3 winners if we want.
But of the 2 options that I had, or of the 2 performances where I had to choose for this category, it's a coin flip. I could have gone either way. But now I get to champion both here. That is certainly the fun of the exercise.
I have a guess which 2 you're talking about. I don't want to say it because I don't want to spoil the fun.
You'll figure it out very quickly.
I'll leave it at that. I think I know which one you're talking about. And I will say, I don't think it's the same one that I'm referring to.
Yeah. Longtime listeners of the show, or even if you've just been with us for the last 5 years, when you hear the performances that are at the top of my list, you will not at all in any way, shape, or form be surprised. There's no gotcha moment here. I'm not trying to pull a James Gunn. Okay.
You know what? I am very deliberately shifting things in my top 5 right now, just because I am so confident in what this example is of yours and that it's in your top 5. I'm going to remove it from my top 5 just to add more variety to this conversation, because I'm pretty sure I know which one you're talking about.
Okay.
And when we get to it, I'll admit that that's what it is.
All right. Sounds good. All right. Let's go ahead and jump into this, Brennan. top 5 performances of the decade so far. What do you have at number 5?
So my number 5, bit of a surprise. This is one that did not win in its respective category, which I guess kind of spoils that there's another one in this category from this same year that's somewhere in my top 5. But for my number 5, I'm going to the year 2021, going to Best Actress. My number 5 is Alana Haim from Licorice Pizza.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good
and
stuff.
I think partially why I'm giving her such an edge here is that I don't think we talk nearly enough about how complicated and difficult this performance was, especially given kind of the ickiness of the material at hand. I gave the movie a rewatch just because there was always something about this movie that never left my mind, even though it didn't quite crack my top 5 of that year when we did that top 10.
Okay.
And rewatching it again, really focusing on the discomfort of this central quote unquote romance, if you want to even call it that. I think a lot of that is so effective, not just because of Paul Thomas Anderson and his clever writing and directing, but Alana Haim's performance, I think, adds some really interesting nuance to this really icky relationship front and center. And at the time, I called this kind of a coming of de-aging movie as opposed to a coming of age movie, because it really is, in many ways, a relationship between a young boy who has grown up too quickly and then a woman who has grown up physically but isn't ready to. And that interest in childhood, that looking back of sorts, especially given the ugliness of this world and who these people would grow up into in this kind of Hollywood landscape, I think makes for a really challenging role, the character of Alana, played by Alana Haim. And I think she adds a level of complexity and nuance in something that would otherwise just be very uncomforting. And I think that's a really hard thing to pull off. So there's something about that performance and the challenging aspect of it that I wanted to highlight here, because I really think it is a very difficult performance. And it makes you really engage with a character that if the performance didn't hit, you couldn't engage with her. And that's what makes it kind of a magic trick in many ways. So I wanted to highlight her here. I think it's a really, really complicated performance.
Yeah, I love this pick. I love this movie. This is a great honorable mention for me. There is something raw about her performance that I do really love. And I don't mean raw as in this is her first major role and you can tell that she's not a seasoned actor. It's honestly quite the opposite of that. She feels like she's been doing this for a while, but there's something about the raw, unpolished energy that she brings to that film that makes the character lived in and honest and funny and messy and insecure and confident. Like, she's all of those things simultaneously that I really love. And you need all of those when you're in a Paul Thomas Anderson movie, like especially in a film like Licorice Pizza. I love that impulsive, earnest energy that she has. It's brilliant. So yeah, I love that pick as well.
So good.
That's good stuff. Okay, for my number 5, I'm going to a performance that came out in, what was this, 2022?
Okay.
I want to say.
Okay.
I'm going with the great Cate Blanchett from Tar.
That's a good one.
Tar action.
That's a good one.
Yeah, love this performance. One of the most powerful that we've seen in the last 5 years. And Cate Blanchett, it's hard to really boil her career down to just a few performances. Inevitably, when it's all said and done and you have to pick a top 5, good luck with that. I don't know how you're going to manage that with Cate Blanchett. But Tar, this performance, it feels like a top 5 Cate Blanchett performance to me. I absolutely love what she does here, completely disappearing into this role as this world famous conductor who is clearly brilliant, but equally manipulative. And it's impressive how Blanchett balances that sharp, intimidating presence with these small cracks of vulnerability that slowly widen as the film goes on. Every gesture, every pause, every line delivery is so precise. It's like she's orchestrating that character in the same way that Lydia would conduct music. It
Sure.
pulls you in. It never begs for your sympathy. It just demands your attention. And it is brilliant. There's obviously something really uncomfortable about it, given what the film is tackling, thematically speaking. And Blanchett manages to make that character feel so lived in, to the point where, and we talked about this when we reviewed it here on the show, it feels more like a biopic than a work of fiction. Like we should be able to Google Lydia Tarr, and she's a real person, this real conductor that is extremely famous and had this falling out. There's something about Blanchett and how she taps into that in her performance that I just really love. It's extraordinary. And I do think this is one of her best works. Again, I don't know wherever you want to rank it, I would understand. Like there's a lot of great performances to choose from, but this is certainly up there for me.
Yeah, it kind of feels like a culmination of her talents as an actress, all rolled into one character, which makes it so explosive. It's also a very funny performance. And that's something that I responded to when I first saw the movie. That scene with the accordion is one of the funniest things I saw in any movie of that year. And it's interesting coming from a movie like Tar that at times also feels kind of like this weird horror film, kind of sandwiched inside this pseudo fake music biopic of sorts that's about no one that's real. It's a really fascinating movie that does stick with you, and her performance is a real big reason for that.
Yeah, absolutely love it. It's fantastic. All right, what do you got at number 4?
Number 4, going to the year 2024, very recent here. Chris Hemsworth, Furiosa, a Mad Max saga.
Okay, so this, I'm going to spoil it now. This is just outside my top 5. And I will say all day long, I was wrestling with this mightily. I kept looking at my list and going, man, I love my 5. But I somehow want to just shoehorn this performance in there somewhere.
It's kind of interesting you say that, JD, because before getting into this exercise, just a few moments ago, I said that I removed something from my top 5 because I thought you were going to have it. I thought this is the one that you were referring to as far as like a double nominee of sorts that somehow made it into your top 5. And when I removed this particular option, I made room for Chris Hemsworth because I was kind of going through I was kind of doing the same thing
as well. Yeah.
It was just outside, and then I ended up bumping it to number 4 of all places. And for probably the same reasons that you were going back and forth with it, there's something about his performance that I just can't shake, that just doesn't leave my mind. And I think a lot of it is also just given the film's very interesting and melancholic deconstruction on what revenge films ultimately can be. And a lot of that is due to his performance, just the haunting nature of what vengeance can do to you. We've seen that trope in many revenge movies before, but Chris Hemsworth as Dementus taps into it in such a way that gives it a very different and almost biblical meaning. And a lot of that is also Anya Taylor-Joy. The back and forth between them at the very end of the movie is really the thing that defines the movie for a lot of people, me included. But Chris Hemsworth does something so magnetic and so explosively sad as well that I just can't shake it. I just can't shake what he's doing in that movie. And I felt like I would be lying to myself if I didn't make room for him in my top 5. So here it is.
Yeah, I love this performance. I absolutely adore it. I am with you. This was my vote for Best Supporting Actor last year. There is there's this epic energy that he brings to it, but there's also this tragic underbelly that I love that comes out in every scene in that film, and it's spectacular. It is incredible. It is an immaculate performance for the world of George Miller and what he's trying to create in the story of Furiosa, and it crystallizes in just astounding fashion. He was perfect. He should have been nominated, probably should have won the Oscar. I would have given him the Oscar if it was up to me.
Same here.
I love it.
Same here.
I love it. And like I said, this is probably my number 6. I really, really wanted him to be in the 5, but just, really struggled. But that is to say, Hemsworth with my 5, pretty interchangeable, I would say.
It's really good stuff.
Good stuff here. All right. My number 4 is another supporting actor performance. So again, could have included him here instead of the performance that I'm going to talk about. But the performance I'm going to talk about is one that I cannot shake. It's funny. I put out a tweet over the weekend asking for everyone's top 5 performances of the decade so far. And we got a lot of responses. Maybe I missed it. That certainly could be the case. But I don't think that I saw this a single time, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
And it's also interesting because it's a film that on a first viewing, I didn't initially love. In fact, there are some elements of it that I am still wrestling with. I think it really comes down to your perspective on how you feel about its protagonist that really defines my final interpretation of it.
Interesting.
But what really works about the film, regardless of how you feel about the protagonist, is this supporting performance. I am speaking of the great Vincent Lindon from Titan from 2021. That is
Whoa.
my number
Okay.
4 here.
Did not expect
Yes.
this one to come in fruition here.
Yeah, I figured this would be the surprise. The next 3 performances I'm going to talk about are not going to be a surprise.
This is a huge surprise. I know. I mean,
Yeah.
not for you because I know you love this movie and this performance. I just didn't expect it to come in this 5.
Yeah, I can't shake it. I can't shake it. I absolutely love this performance. And the reason that I love it, and again, I wanted to set up the pretext around Alexia for a reason, because there's an argument, especially given the allegory of the film, as to where Alexia fits on the empathy spectrum. Are we supposed to empathize with her, or is it more conflicting than that, given the actions that she takes early on in the film? Let's be honest, she's kind of a repulsive character in some ways. But it is that repulsiveness that gives weight to Vincent's actions in the back half of the film. Because I would argue, at least my interpretation of the film and what it's trying to do thematically, is that much of what Alexia does, and she exploits grief. That's what she does. She exploits grief for her own benefit. And as a result, it borderlines on Gaspar Noé's climax territory in terms of how distant you can get from it, at least for me.
I was kind of thinking, if you're going to pick a best supporting actor from this movie, we can easily pick an object and pick that car.
You could pick an object. Getting back to my main through line here, though. So Alexia, she exploits that grief, and it obviously has this consequence on the Vincent character. And as the film unfolds, the movie doesn't do really anything to justify her choices. If anything, it just gives credence to that repulsive behavior. But that, again, is the brilliance of the film for me, and why it's a double-edged sword, because of her choices, how repulsed you may be from her. It gives weight to how Vincent chooses love with Alexia later on. To see his grief manifest the way it does by choosing her and choosing to comfort her and respond to her, as we see there, it is emotionally arresting. It is astounding. And because of how the film is crafted, that idea, that emotion, it doesn't come through really in the storytelling because it's all built as this allegory. It is all in the performance. It is Vincent Linden doing the heavy lifting. He is the one making that emotion come through so palpably. And I was struck by it in such a visceral way. It is really powerful. I love it. And I haven't really stopped thinking about it over the last few years. Again, I know this came out early on in the decade. This was a 2021 film for us here in the United States anyway. And it is still one of my very favorite supporting actor performances of the decade so far. And for me, it fits here in my top 5.
Yeah, this is technically one of those movies that I would have needed to watch again to really get a grasp on what it's doing performatively, especially, but it's the kind of movie that's hard to stomach a second time. So I just haven't, haven't partaken in that exercise. But I do remember, and I know I'm alone on this, the thing that bothered me the most about the movie was actually Vincent Linden's performance. I found him to be the grotesque one until the ending. I think the ending is where things get recontextualized for me, and I found something very loving and tender about it. But not so much at first. And I had a very different reading on the film that I wasn't sure if it was going for or not, but it did make for maybe a provocative conversation nonetheless. And I do give the actor a lot of credit for really taking a chance like this in such risque material and going for it in the way that he does. And by the end, he does own up to the challenge and delivering something very sad and moving and something that feels like it doesn't even need to have it. And I thought that was kind of neat.
Yeah, again, and that's why I wanted to set this up, because obviously given what that film is, a lot of that film in general, the performances, the craft, all of it is simply going to come down to how you want to interpret that allegory or how you see and feel about these characters. And I don't want to paint it as Vincent being this angelic character he's not Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible. Okay. Of course there is.
Yeah, he's not a messianic figure out to save the movies.
Yeah. He's not Jesus. There are nuances to him, of course. As is the case with Alexia. For me, though, I very much saw not just what Alexia does early on in terms of the violence that she partakes in. And for me, it's less that, although that is certainly part of it. For me, it's more so how she exploits his grief. That to me is the defining trait that, again, really stresses the empathy factor for me. And where I felt quite distant from the character, and I'm mostly talking dramatically here. And again, I know that the film is mostly functioning allegorically, so maybe that is unfair. But when I look at that film dramatically, the choices that she makes and that exploitation that she engages in as it relates to Vincent, I think it, for me, the empathy wavers for sure. Where Vincent, I felt that much more. And again, I think part of it isn't just the material, it is Linden and how he taps into it, because this is a film that, despite its on the surface, in your face direction, we can say, the performances, at least Linden, there is a great subtlety to the performance that I really love. And especially those final moments when he had every right to choose the opposite of what he does. And ironically, this is where it does become a bit Christ-like, because despite the, like, what she chooses, despite the argument that she doesn't deserve it, and I would argue that I don't know if she does, given the choices that she makes. But it's a little bit of that Mary Magdalene thing where
Yeah.
You know, it's a flawed character, but what he chooses is love anyway. He chooses forgiveness. Like he just chooses to embrace her rather than throw the stone, so to speak. And there's something about how the film manifests that, especially in Lyndon's performance, that has always stayed with me. I had always stayed with me pretty deeply.
It's a bold movie and a bold performance nonetheless. I don't disagree with that at all.
Yeah, I really love it. So
That's a
that
very
is
inspired
number 4.
pick. Very inspired pick.
All right, what do you got at number 3 then?
Nice transition to my number 3, actually, because with a movie like Titan and you talk about repulsive characters, my number 3 is absolutely a repulsive character. I'm going back to the year 2024 once again. Juliette Garibe for Red.
Oh boy. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Probably like this decade's version of Hannibal Lecter in a way. I think comps like that are certainly apt. Maybe the most evil performance I think I've seen this decade, to the point that I cannot help but defend it, but also cannot help but be wrapped up in it. It takes a lot for a performance on its own terms to scare me and unnerve me in such a way. A lot of times when you see a very frightening movie, there are other factors at play that pull you in and frighten you. Sometimes it could be performative. Sometimes it could be other things. But this is a movie that's already effective on its own terms, given its very slick direction and its slick writing. But Juliette Garibe's performance on its own still scares the living shit out of me. And like, if that's not high praise, I don't know what is. It's a truly demented and truly evil performance, and really taps into something that might be among the most evil things that we find in our society today. And that's just this obsession with such grotesque violence and real life crime. So many people do suffer from this. And her performance is speaking to such a truth in a very heightened way, mind you, but she never loses sight of that truthfulness. And that's what makes it so frightening. It is easily the scariest thing I think I've seen of that year, and maybe even in some years since. And the fact that it came from purely a performance, I had to talk about it here. I had to. It's just something I can't shake.
It's a really great performance. It is incredibly disturbing. I still maintain that the courtroom scene was the best scene of last year. Absolutely jolting. And while the film certainly does a lot of work to make that as disturbing as it is, a lot of it also is the performance. It's the creepy look on her face, the way she embraces the victim and her persona as she's being carried out of the courtroom. Absolutely horrifying. Like it is.
Oh my
God. It is incredible. But like so much.
What an image. What an image.
Even outside of that moment, as incredible as it is, the rest of the film and how it leads, like how it builds toward that, is quite remarkable.
The way she stares at a computer is still among the most frightening things of that year.
Oh yeah, I agree. I agree.
Wild stuff.
Remarkable performance. I guess for my number 3, we're just going to stick with the year 2024. And my number 3 is also my pick for Best Actress. It is Connie Kuzruti for All We Imagine as Light.
That's a great one.
I know a lot of people still haven't seen this film. It's still making the rounds. When you get a chance to see this, if you haven't seen it already, I beg and plead for you to watch this as soon as possible. It is an astounding movie. I absolutely love it. And so much of it comes down to the performances, including Kuzruti, who is one of our leads here, maybe the main lead here. And essentially she plays a woman whose husband is in Germany, I believe, or supposed to be in Germany. He's working, trying to provide for the family. They haven't been around each other in so long. And there is this incredibly emotional underbelly to the character where we sense her loneliness and this deep desire for connection that she has throughout the film. And it is all done through remarkable subtlety. She does have dialogue in the film, and if we were to count all of the words that Kuzruti say throughout, it's about 24.
I was going to say it's like 4.
She doesn't hardly say a thing, and yet she conveys more than most ever do.
Yeah.
Like the texture and the character, it is all done through great cinematography for sure, but subtlety and allowing the human body to evoke that emotion. I think of the rice cooker scene, for example. There's a moment where it's dark, it's in the middle of the night, there's light coming in through the city there in Mumbai, and she gets this rice cooker from her husband earlier in the day, and while she has no sentimental value to the rice cooker itself, it's brand new, she's never seen it before, the fact that it was from her husband is all that it took for her to become vulnerable. And she just grabs that rice cooker while sitting on the floor and just embraces it and hugs it, holds it close as if it's a family heirloom. It is astounding. And it just speaks to, and we've talked about this forever, how performances are often more powerful when they're not the loud Oscar-y thing. And I get it.
Yeah.
A lot of people love the loud Oscar-y thing.
They want the
Maybe
clips.
I'm in a vast
They want the
minority
clips.
here. They want the clips. But look, the loud Oscar-y thing is often the least compelling element of a performance for me. I think there's
Right.
more vulnerability. There's more humanity in the other stuff.
Yeah, you got to do the work to find it sometimes.
Yeah, it's such as this rice cooker moment. There's so much deep humanity to it, and she doesn't say a thing. I think about the final scene of the film as well, and there's certainly many other examples I could bring up here where the character is simply there in frame, and the film is allowing the performance to do literally, I shouldn't say literally, because the cinematography is quite remarkable.
Helping. Yeah.
But she is doing a lot of the lifting of that film, and it is a remarkable performance. Stoic for sure, but it is full of exquisite life, and I love it. I cannot say enough good things about Connie Kuzruti. My number 3 here.
In doing this whole exercise and looking back on previous years and kind of competing each year with each other as if to say what year was the best as far as just performances in general, it just goes to show how strong of a year lead actresses were in 2024, because I have 6 best actress nominees for me that I think are among at least being worthy of the conversation of some of the best performances of the decade. Connie Kuzruti is one of them, who actually didn't even make my 5 when we did that award show, but it just goes to show how strong of a year that was, because you had Juliette Garibe, which I just talked about. You have Connie Kuzruti, who you just talked about. You also had people like Marianne Jean-Baptiste and Chartreuse, Mikey Madison and Honora. I loved Nell Tiger Free in The First Omen, which was a very brave and effortless performance. Daisy Ridley had a great year that year. Sometimes I think about Dying, really great stuff. I think if anything, 2024 last year was probably the best year as far as just performances, I think.
Yeah,
just given how strong that category was.
I agree. And then you have someone like Fernando Torres as well, who went on to have that amazing Oscar campaign.
Yeah.
Or similar to your Nell Tiger Free pick there, which might go a little bit under the radar because it wasn't an awards performance.
Right.
I also think of Inca Manoloche and Do Not Expect Too Much from the End of the World, which was this international film that not many people saw. It wasn't nominated for an Oscar or anything of the sort, but equally one of those striking, this is easily one of the best films or performances of the year kind of thing, but nobody saw it.
Yeah.
So it adds to your argument that you could easily come up with a 10 that are interchangeable when it comes to Best Actress last year. It was a really great year for Best Actress.
That was a strong year for performances, and not just Best Actress. I already talked about Chris Hemsworth from Furiosa, also from that year. So I think if we're going to pick a winning year as far as best performances, I think it might be that one.
Yeah, it's strong. And look, it makes sense. The one thing that we haven't brought up in this conversation at all, because we're simply talking about the best performances of the decade, maybe we should bring it up because this decade will always be defined by COVID. And 2020, 2021, maybe parts of 2022, the industry was clearly in disarray, like trying to figure out how to survive COVID, come out of COVID.
There is definitely a bit of an arc working its way back towards the norm of what Hollywood would be normally associated with.
I agree. And look, I think there were some great films in 2020 and especially in 2021, but there is no doubt you look at at least when I look at my top 20, 30 from those years, and even in this context performances, and then I look at the last couple of years, and there's certainly an upwards rise on the graph of, the industry was coming back from COVID.
You could see the escalator, right?
Yeah.
Which is a very interesting transition to my number 2, because my number 2 performance of the decade so far is actually from the year 2021, when things were still wrapping up. And I mentioned earlier, I had someone from 2021 earlier in this top 5, and that was Alana Haim from Licorice Pizza. My other nominee in Best Actress competing against Alana Haim for me is my number 2, and that's Renata Reinsve for The Worst Person in the World.
Yeah. Which was your winner of that year.
That was my winner. Yeah. And she still holds strong for me. If this were a film that was as big of a critical hit, but it just happened to be an American production spoken in English, what we would see here was a movie star making performance. I think it's that type of performance. And clearly, Renata Reinsve has had a very strong and very critically successful career since this movie. We're going to see her again later on this year in Sentiment of Value, the next Joachim Trier film, who also directed this. But what I think is so strong about this performance is the movie itself does this, but a lot of this is because of Reinsve's performance as well. It kind of redefines what the coming of age film is in a way, that it's not just about childhood. Sometimes a 30-year-old can come of age. And this basically is about that thing. And the way that she's able to find this kind of common ground between maturity and immaturity, innocence and responsibility, toying this kind of tug of war between a very childlike irresponsibility, but still recognizing where you need to be an adult in certain situations. I just think she does that so well. It's very tricky, and you can never take your eyes off of her. So I think as a movie, as a performance, as a lead performance that carries a movie, it is really effective stuff. And it's one that will always stay with me just because of how commanding and electrifying that she is in this. I love her performance here.
Yeah, I love it as well. And I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but as part of the exercise, when we get to our top 5 movies of the decade so far, at least I will partake. I don't want to force Brendan to do so, but we did this the last time as well. I do want to revisit my top 10 list for each of the years and talk about the differences that have been made since we did those lists originally. Maybe we can do that for bonus content. Because
I think that'd be a great idea. Yeah, because some of these I am revisiting to see how well they hold up for me and to see what has changed.
Absolutely. And look, The Worst Person in the World was in my top 10 the year that it came out. But I will admit, at this point, I haven't fully decided quite yet. Again, we still have a few weeks to determine all of this. That film might now be my number 1 of that year. If it's not, it's very close.
I was really
certainly jumped up to
I was really
top 2.
hoping. I was hoping you were gonna go in that direction and not say it's one I've soured on as the years have gone.
No. I can't stop thinking about it. I think it's great. again, I loved it at the time as well, but there is something about that film. And to your point, the central performance here by Renata Reinsva that, like I was talking about with Vincent Linden, I just cannot stop thinking about it. It is still top of mind, and I really love it. Like I think ultimately, worst case, I'm going to come down with that sitting at my number 2 for that year. I still have to wrestle with it. Either way, it has climbed that list for me significantly. And a big part of that is Reinsva's performance. And I wholeheartedly agree with you. It's this incredible mix of charm and confusion and restlessness and vulnerability that feels extremely honest. And I love how it crystallizes at the end in this coming of age like way, as you mentioned. It's fantastic stuff. I absolutely adore it.
Yeah,
So,
I think she employs every emotion imaginable, and yet somehow it doesn't feel crowded or anything
it's
like
great.
that.
Yeah. No, I agree. And similar to Hemsworth, another performance I very much wrestled with here that I almost included. So again, and we'll get to honorable mentions here at the end, but that's probably 7 on this list if we're expanding it out
Okay.
to a 10.
Okay.
All right. We're at the point in the show where my next 2 picks here are not going to be a surprise at all. If there is a little bit of a surprise, it's that it has flipped-flopped from the year in which they came out. So with that said,
Okay.
we're going to the year 2022, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
it's
think
2022.
I think I know where you're going with this. I think I at least know the actor you're going to be going with this one.
All right. The year is 2022. For my next 2 picks, we are going to be spending our time in the best actor category. For my number 2, I'm going with Colin Farrell.
Knew it. I knew it.
Pick a performance. I am going to go with both of them. I'm going to go with The Banshees of Inisherin and After Yang because I love both of them. And
The Banshees of After Yang is basically what you're going with here.
yeah. And look, I want to spend most of this time with After Yang because The Banshees of Inisherin was the Oscars pick of that year. Obviously, that's the film that most people associate him with in 2022. And it is a really great performance. I do not want to undermine it at all. I think it is really, really great. And I do love how he renders a dullness to that character that is somehow captivating. It is really, really great. But there's also a melancholy and a sorrow to his performance in The Banshees of Inisherin. It's not a flashy performance. I wouldn't say that it's traditional Oscar-y. It's a bit brighter than After Yang for sure, but I still think it's full of great subtlety. It's a very sincere performance, and I really do love it.
Yeah.
After Yang, however, I think is equally one of his very best performances to date.
Yeah.
It is
It's not as immediate
incredible.
as The Banshees of Inisherin. You have to work for it. But it's in a weird way, you can argue that the 2 best performances of his career were these
came
2
from that
movies.
year,
Yeah.
from the same year. Absolutely. You could have easily have nominated him for After Yang and could have won for that performance as well. It's not as immediate for sure. And it's a little bit of that Connie Kuzruti thing when I was talking about subtlety. This is a richly layered performance, but it is very understated. It is all done through subtlety. And I love how he taps into not just the character's grief, but the frustration and uncertainty that he experiences as well. Ultimately, the film, if you're not familiar, it is about this family who has this robot. Yang is the name of the robot character, and it essentially dies, for the lack of a better term. It goes offline. And because in this futuristic sci-fi world, these robots are essentially part of your family. And so there is this element of grief that the family is having to cope with. But he learns things about Yang throughout the film that evokes these ideas as far as memories are concerned. And in particular, there's a moment where he gets to experience Yang's memories. And what we come to find out even more specifically is that Yang was able to capture 10 memories. Those are the ones that he got to constantly keep updated. He could only choose 10. And it kind of evokes this question of, if you could only capture 10 memories of your life, what would that list look like? How would you determine that 10? Like, that's a fascinating conversation. And I think there's another element to it that in the film, Jake, the Colin Farrell character, he gets to look at that through the eyes of someone else. So it's not just his own 10 that he would have to choose, but he gets to look at it through Yang's perspective. And he gets to look at those memories and how he saw the world, how he saw himself in this world with his family. And there's something subtly profound about that I love in the film, but I especially love Colin Farrell's performance and how Jake wrestles with it. It is incredible. And one of my favorite scenes that taps into that even further is what I just simply dubbed this tea scene, where he's making tea and Yang as a robot is asking him about tea and why Jake loves tea. And again, it is incredibly melancholic. It is sorrowful. It's quiet. It's stoic in a way, but it's also full of this incredible humanity, understated humanity that I think is breathtaking, absolutely breathtaking, that moment to see those characters go back and forth. It was one of my favorite scenes of that year. And there's just something about the way Colin Farrell treats that character and the melancholy that he pours in that just took my breath away. Like, almost literally took my breath away, his performance in that film. And I deeply love it. So most people listening to this, you've seen The Banshees of Inisherin, you know what I'm talking about. Some of you might not have seen After Yang, so I wanted to spend a little bit more time on it, and I cannot urge people to go and watch. I truly think it is one of, if not the best performance of his career.
Yeah.
I love it.
So I mentioned earlier in this conversation, GD, that I did have a pick that I purposely bumped out of my top 5 because I thought it would be in your list, and it was this one. And when I say this one, I just mean Colin Farrell. It doesn't matter. Like, I had these as a tie. I really did. I prefer The Banshees of Inisherin as a movie. I'm not going to say if it's in my top 5 of the decade, but it is one of my favorite movies of the decade so far, for sure. And I do really like After Yang as well, but I think both performances are perhaps the best things that Colin Farrell has ever done in his entire career, for very different reasons. They're very different performances, but the fact that he did these back to back, kind of incredible. Definitely showcases the talent that he is.
It's pretty remarkable that it worked out that way. I don't know if he shot them back to back or not.
Yeah, I don't know what the schedule was, but needless to say, if he was doing them back to back and also doing it simultaneously, how the heck is he able to bounce back and forth between such different characterizations?
It is quite remarkable. It really was the year of Colin Farrell in that regard. And, that's also the year of Tar, as I noted earlier. So despite it being early-ish on in the decade, that was really the turning point, probably late 2021 and into 2022, where the tide started to shift a little bit, especially when you get to the summer of 2022, because that's when Top Gun Maverick comes into play and Tom Cruise saves cinema, as we all know. He is the savior of cinema. But it was an extraordinary year, not just for the Tom Cruise of it all, but so much of what came out outside of the summer blockbusters. And After Yang and Banshees, very much there. They actually sit back to back on my top 10 list. So yeah,
of course, how appropriate.
Love them. Yeah.
So, and you
Very much
said
so.
your number one is also from the best actor category, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Trying to figure out if I can guess which one yours is. I won't say it now,
It
but
won't shock you.
I I think I know what it is looking at these potential maybe I don't. I feel like there are at least two here that it could be.
Okay.
It's got to be one of these two. If it's not one of these two, I will be surprised. I'll simply say that.
All right. Well, we'll get to it. What do you got at your number one?
My number one is also from the best leading actor category. And if you know me well enough, JD, this should not be a surprise to you. I'm going to the year 2023, Koji Yakusho from Wim Wenders' Perfect Days.
Okay. Yep. There it is.
Yeah. I mean, you got it. This is not a surprise for you, right? You kind of saw this coming, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
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 No, this is not a shock at all. It's a
Yeah.
great performance. I love it. Absolutely love it.
Yeah. Still my favorite performance of the decade so far. And I think why that's the case, it's kind of similar as to why I love Renata Reinsve so much and The Worst Person in the World. You know, a great performance is a great performance when you feel like you've actually gotten to know the character as someone that you think that like is someone in your life, right? Like they're a part of your life. You've gotten to know someone new. And I feel that way about Renata Reinsve and The Worst Person in the World. And I also feel that way about Koji Yakusho in Perfect Days. I feel like I got to know him. I really did. And the way that he taps into this idea of something we love in movies, beauty in the mundane, right? But we experience his joy for living such a simple lifestyle, which is kind of a new thing for these kind of movies. And while there is a lot of joy there, there is also a lot of pain. And all of this is communicated without dialogue, really. I mean, it is kind of a silent performance. There is dialogue for sure. It is a spoken performance. It's not a fully dialogue-less performance, but it might as well be. It's a performance purely based on gestures, eye contact, communications through movement, and that's a difficult thing to do. And I think that's what makes it so human. It's the most human performance I think I've seen so far this decade among many performances that you could easily call human. That's what makes acting so great sometimes. But I think this is the one that taps into that idea the best that I've seen so far. It really does move me. I've seen this movie twice and it's gotten better each time. So I really think it's a perfect performance in what I think is a perfect movie. So Perfect Days, really, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know where this ranks for me, but it is a really great honorable mention. This was nominated for me when it came out as well. And I wholeheartedly agree with you. It falls in line with everything we've been talking about with Connie Cruz Rudy or even Colin Farrell and After Yang. There is this quiet subtlety to it that is so deeply lived in. And again, mostly wordless. I mean, there is a competition between this one and Connie Cruz Rudy as to who says the least amount in their respective movies.
That'd be a fun game to play. Yeah. Which one is it? But man, the character here of Hirayama in Perfect Days. I just wanted to hug him. I take it back.
Yeah.
I wanted to listen to music with him. That's what I wanted to do.
Yeah. Connie Cruz Rudy, though, and it's funny that you say that because I kind of lost my mind when we were doing that review of All We Imagine Is Light when we were talking about the character of Prabha, because that's all I wanted to do. At the end of that film, I just wanted to give her a hug. Be like, it's going to be okay.
And maybe cook a little rice for her.
Yeah, exactly. Like, but yeah, I mean, but you do, like, this is a character you deeply empathize with and how he sees beauty in these small things, whether it be music or the sunlight or the trees, whatever it is. Like he definitely sees the world in this pure way that is interestingly juxtaposed to this mystery surrounding his family that I think is compelling. It's good stuff. Absolutely love it.
Agreed.
All right, my number one. This is not going to be a surprise, I don't think.
Okay. Yeah.
It shouldn't be.
I'm stuck between two that it could be. Is it from the year 2022?
It is, yeah.
Okay, I think I know who it is. Yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah, this is not going to come as a shock to anybody. My number one here is Paul Mescal from After Sun.
Yeah. So I was stuck between that and Cillian Murphy from Oppenheimer.
Yeah. And look, the interesting thing is, I don't know if I really would change my pick because I awarded Colin Farrell Best Actor that year over Paul Mescal.
Well, he was the better actor, just given the duality of those two movies. He had the better year.
Even though I have Paul Mescal here at number one, I don't think that I would change that vote at all because it really was the year of Colin Farrell.
That's a reflection of the year of Colin Farrell as opposed to the individual performances in a vacuum that we're talking about here.
Exactly. And there's not any disparity here. Honestly, I could have put Colin Farrell at number one, and I don't think anyone.
You could still sleep at night, right?
Yeah, exactly. No one would have. No one would have argued with me. But there is something about Paul Mescal, and admittedly, part of this is that After Sun piece that I wrote earlier in the year after that unexpected viral tweet that went out and people were forcing me to go and write about After Sun.
Yeah, you were forced, man. You were in prison to write this piece.
I definitely put myself at a little bit of a spot there. But look, I enjoyed it. I did do that piece and I deeply, deeply enjoyed it. And that exercise, as much as I love the film and I love Mescal's performance in it, it just reminded me of how deeply layered and textured and emotional that performance is. But again, there is certainly a running theme with the type of performances that I love, even though there are a few moments of Mescal in that film being a little outwardly aggressive, but it's not your traditional loud Oscar-y type of nuance. And what I love about the film is that it's mostly understated. And Mescal and how he's able to tap into that is incredible. But given the context of that film, what's interesting about the character and how he acts throughout the film is that it is reflecting this idea of hurt people.
Yeah.
You very much sense that with the character, and specifically that he is trying to avoid being victim of it when he's with his daughter. And it gobsmacks you when you come to understand the gravity of that with the character and what he is contemplating, what he's really wrestling with. He is a really hurt character.
Absolutely.
And how that comes through in the filmmaking is absolutely spectacular, but Mescal taps into it in a fascinating way where, yes, the character is hurting, but he's trying really hard not to let his daughter be exposed to that. And that dichotomy in the film, in Mescal's performance, is extraordinary. And a big reason I have this here at number one, I think of two scenes in particular, although we could certainly come up with many.
I'm sure, yeah.
But the two outside of the one I wrote about at InSessionFilm.com, I specifically focused on the room in the hotel with the TV, when the camera, when the camera is looking at the television screen and you're getting the reflection there.
Yeah.
That moment is really great. And I don't want to undermine that moment because specifically when Mescal is telling the story, when Callum is telling the story of what happened to him at his 9th birthday, 10th birthday, whatever it is, and how his parents forgot that it was his birthday. Like, him telling that story is exactly this dichotomy that I'm telling about, because it clearly has this deep effect on him, but he can't let that come to the surface because he's telling that story to his daughter. It's an extraordinary moment. And the fact that it's just the camera, stationary camera, getting the reflection of the TV. Oh, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. But the other two scenes I just want to quickly mention here is, like, I think of that moment of the two of them just sitting there on the bed, and Callum is tenderly rubbing her face and sifting his fingers through his hair. There's such an incredible melancholy to it, given the context of where this film goes. Like, on its face, it's just this endearing moment between a father and daughter.
Yeah.
But Callum knows where this is going to end. So it's a moment that, given the psychology of the character, there's certainly more weight to it in hindsight. And Callum knows this. And you can see it on Mescal's face, like how he kind of gives that film more, or gives that moment more weight than it would be in a vacuum on its own terms.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other one that a lot of people have brought up with this film that is incredible is when he's brushing his teeth and he's talking to Sophia about having a good day, and they've come home and they're exhausted, and all Callum can muster in the moment is, we're here to have a good day despite being tired. And it's this fascinating response given his inner turmoil and the looming despair that hovers over him. But in Mescal's performance, you get the sense that he understands what his daughter is saying, but he can't give in to that despair. Again, it's this incredible dichotomy. So when the camera comes back to him, because much of it is focused on Sophia lying on the bed, and there's some great visual symbolism and reflection going on there. But when the camera cuts back to him, you get this incredible medium shot or close up of him looking at himself in the mirror, and he just spits toothpaste at himself in the mirror in disgust. Heartbreaking. Absolutely devastating.
So many layers to this performance. It's a performance I can only equate to like being a time bomb in a way, where something is eventually about to explode. And you do get a moment in the movie that is perhaps explosive, or I guess cathartic is the right word. I believe it takes place in a bathtub or something, if I'm not mistaken. While it is a very cathartic and emotional scene, what makes the performance so great is that it's clearly building up to something like that. So when that moment comes, it actually means something, right? And a great performance knows how to tap into that eventual explosion without it feeling emotionally gratuitous or something like that. It's a very well paced performance in that regard, because each individual scene, each individual performative thing that he does, every gesture is all slowly building and revealing something new. There's a sense of escalation to this performance, to the point that you would almost think it was shot like chronologically or something like that. And I'm sure that it wasn't, but it does feel very effortless in that way. Like it's built, like it's all, like each individual part of his performance is building off of the moment previously. And that makes it really well timed and really well paced.
I agree. It's so good. I could go on forever and ever, but that is...
Hey, you wrote a whole piece on it.
I did. And that was just one scene. And obviously I've talked about a few more here, but yeah, that's a brilliant, brilliant performance. And again, just that central dichotomy and how it looms in every scene, and how Paul Mescal taps into it. It is striking. It is an absolutely brilliant performance that I love. For me, so far, it is the performance of the decade. And I presume it'll still be in the conversation in some way when we get to the end of the decade.
Oh, I'm sure.
Honorable mentions. What else do you want to mention for honorable mentions here?
If I were to round this out to a top 10, it would probably look something like this. At number 6 is where I have Colin Farrell for both The Banshees of Inisherin and After Yang.
Okay. Yep.
Number 7, Barry Keoghan, also for The Banshees of Inisherin.
Okay.
Number 8, Tong Wei for Decision to Leave, the Park Chan-wook film. Number 9, Simon Rex for Red Rocket, the Sean Baker film.
Yeah.
Number 10, maybe, I don't know, this is where it gets a little difficult. maybe Charles Melton for May December from the year
That's a good one.
2023.
Yep,
There are
that's
a
good
lot
one.
that I didn't even highlight. Cillian Murphy for Oppenheimer, Paul Giamatti for The Holdovers. Who else is here that I want to highlight? Felix Kammerer for All Quiet on the Western Front. Nicolas Cage for Pig.
Mhm.
The year 2020, as much of a lull period as that was, there were some great performances such as Brian Dennehy, the late great Brian Dennehy in Driveways, or Mads Mikkelsen in another round. Swanky, the great Swanky from Nomadland, not even an actress, delivering one of the best monologues of the decade so far.
Yeah.
A few others we can certainly highlight, but those were the ones that stuck out to me the most, and I'm sure you have a few others as well.
I do. If I was going to expand this to a 10, I noted earlier Hemsworth would be my number 6, and Renee Ryansev would be my number 7. My number 8 would be Cillian Murphy. That's where I would have Murphy on this list.
Okay.
Number 9 for me would be Sebastian Stan for A Different Man.
Oh, nice.
And then my number 10 would be Michelle Yeoh for Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. You certainly noted a few others that I definitely wanted to highlight, including Paul Giamatti, whom I absolutely love, Ke Kwan, I really adore, Benedict Cumberbatch, Nick Cage for Pig, Mads Mikkelsen, certainly wanted to highlight. A few others would be Sandra Huller from Anatomy of a Fall. We haven't really talked about him a lot, although I feel like we should. And admittedly, even in the years in which they came out, even though I was really close, and I think I have nominated him for some of our kind of special categories that we've done on the InSession Film Awards outside of the main acting categories. But I do want to highlight Franz Rogowski for Great Freedom and Passages, because those are two extraordinary performances that don't get talked about enough. Kristen Stewart and Vanessa Kirby on my list as well.
Okay.
Certainly many more we could highlight here, but those were a few others that came to mind for me that I definitely considered at some point.
All good stuff.
Good stuff. If you agree or disagree with anything we had to say here, please leave a comment below. We would love to know what your top 5 performances of the decade are so far as well. You can reach out to us on social media. You can email us InSessionFilm@gmail.com. All right, stay tuned. Later on in the week, we do have we have a couple of reviews that we're going to get to, excuse me.
Yeah.
One of them will be the horror film Bring Her Back. And all I have to say about that is Brendan needs to give me my money back.
I'll bring back your money and then some.
Yeah.
We'll also give ourselves some
alert there.
time back by making that review like 5 minutes long.
Yeah, perhaps. Not going to go very long on that one. If others enjoyed it, I'm glad. I'm glad people are enjoying it.
I'm not. I'm kidding. Of course, I'm glad people are getting something out of it.
Yeah. And the other film we're going to talk about is the A24 black comedy / horror, according to Brendan.
Oh, it's more of a
the
horror
film
film than Bring
Friendship.
Her Back is.
I don't necessarily disagree, if I'm being honest. And there's one scene in Friendship that is direct horror and is more terrifying than anything in Bring Her Back.
Does it involve sewers?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is that I'm with you. I am with you.
Yeah. Yeah. Better horror than anything in Bring Her Back. Yep. We'll talk about that one as well.
Yeah,
So those are the 2 reviews this week. Women in Session coming out later on in the week as well. I do want to note we have a Chasing the Gold episode that went out last week with Hector Gonzalez. I talked to him about his experience at the Cannes Film Festival. It was a great conversation. Please go and check that out. And next week on the show will also be something related to Decade So Far. We'll figure out what that is. We'll get to that next week as well.
Absolutely.
So a lot to be on the lookout. So be sure to subscribe to the show. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to subscribe, like, all that fun stuff. And I think that's it, unless I'm forgetting anything.
I think that's good. Just for those listening, yeah, you might want to stick around for that review of Bring Her Back because we got some things to say.
We do. Yeah, I think we're going to have interesting conversation on both of the films, despite where we're laying on them.
I agree. They're both worth talking about for very different reasons.
For sure. Okay, with all of that said, thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on the InSession Film Podcast.
Colin Farrell, baby.